Okay, in this one, I want to discuss the flight or fight response in the body and relate that to what is going on both in the world and on the internet. The human body is incredible. It's an amazing idea. Think about what is going on when you step outside into the world. There is so much information being processed by your body, it's almost too much to even be able to quantify with the mind. You have light rays penetrating your iris, two black holes on your face, the event horizon through which nothing can escape. Everything is pulled in and decoded in a way that it produces an image. And like a motion picture where still frames are strung together and played back at a speed where you cannot tell the difference between the still frames and the moving frames, to the point where it looks like the picture is in motion. It looks like you're observing something being recorded in real time, but really it's just pictures taken at a very high speed and then played back at a speed fast enough so that the eyes can't tell that there are individual images there. It's kind of similar what's going on in the world. You have these rays of light being beamed into your eyes, and it's being done over and over again at such a fast rate that your eyes can't perceive the illusion. Your eyes construct a solid, moving image. This is sort of where the idea of reality being an illusion comes from. It has a refresh rate like a motion picture does, like televisions do now. But the refresh rate is so high that your eyes can't perceive it, and it looks like one fluid image to your perception. But that's not the reality of how it's actually being put together and presented to you. This is why subliminal manipulation works, because that's all embedded upon layers that your conscious perception is not perceiving in the moment. But anyway, that's just the eyes. That's just light waves penetrating the black holes on the front of your face. At the same time, you have sound waves penetrating your eardrums from all different directions the moment that you step out into the world, from wherever you were being shielded from those things, whatever your shelter was. As soon as you step out in the world, you have the light rays hitting your eyes, you have the sound waves hitting your eardrums from all directions. Your sensory decoding system is so powerful that it is decoding and processing noises from 360 degrees around your head. You're picking up on noises in every direction, in a wide range of frequencies. Now, obviously, part of the illusion or the refresh rate that you can't perceive are frequencies that are beyond the scope or scale of your brain's ability to decode or perceive. Decoding is perceiving. They are one and the same, synonymous in this context. This is why a human being can take a whistle made specifically for a dog, blow into it and hear nothing while the dog is going crazy because it has the ability to decode the frequency at which the dog whistle is set. If that's possible, then sure, it just makes logical sense that there would be other frequencies that the human brain is not capable of decoding, both in terms of hearing and in terms of vision. And this is where you can get into ideas of what might exist beyond the frequencies that we do decode that makes up our physical world. And in that way, reality being an illusion makes a lot of sense. It's not as wild of a claim as it might seem initially, especially when it's a shared illusion in that sense. Every human being, assuming they have the senses fully functioning that we are given from birth, well, we're all perceiving the exact same illusion. So in that sense, it's not an illusion at all. It's very real for all of us. And that's just the sound waves. At the same time, you have all of the light waves bombarding your eyes. And then in addition to that, you have all of the tactile sensations that involve your skin. You can feel the breeze or lack thereof in the air. You're breathing air, in fact, as you step outside. You take a big, deep breath and you breathe in fresh air into your lungs. And you're decoding that through your nose and mouth. You're getting a smell of the air, depending on where you are, and processing that information as well. Which, of course, allows you to know if there's something in the air that you should not be inhaling. And in that way, you decode the information around you to know whether or not you're safe. At the same time, you can feel the amount of moisture in the air. We call this humidity. You can feel how wet the atmosphere is. And that's another thing that your body is decoding in that moment. These are only 5 of the traditional senses that I'm referring to here, all operating at once. But when you really take a second and think about it, what is really transpiring, it's amazing that the human body can even walk 10 steps and simultaneously decode all of this information that is coming at it at all times. There is no break from the information decoding that's going on. Sound waves, light waves, and then taste, touch, and smell being decoded in its own way. It's more difficult to refer to that kind of thing as waves. Like I said with touch, you can kind of get an idea of that with the relationship to the air, or a rainstorm that starts showering you with water. Again, this is another thing that feeds into your ability to decode the environment around you. You see dark clouds, you hear a thunder in the distance, a rumbling, you see a bright flash of light coming from those clouds, and you just intuitively know, I should go somewhere else. Meanwhile, you're decoding all kinds of other information at the same time that's factoring into your moment-to-moment decision-making. And that's just the information decoded outwardly. At the same time that all of that is going on, you have all of the involuntary bodily functions taking place on the inside of your body at the same time. Your heart is beating. The blood is circulating through your body. Your lungs are contracting and expanding, in the same way that the heart is contracting and expanding. The symphony of the organs all working together. And speaking of waves of energy that our brain is not capable currently of decoding, you have all of these electromagnetic fields that are emanating from the organs as they perform these functions together. They create a music in that way, a symphony, like I said. We've all seen the cameras that measure infrared activity, or in other words, it measures body temperature. And in that way, you can see a living being light up as red because it's giving off a high temperature compared to everything around it. Well, just imagine that there was a device that could record and show the electromagnetic fields that are emanating from your body. And bigger than that, imagine that that device was recording people interacting with each other. And you could see the different kinds of music, as it were, the different symphonies that were taking place holistically through the body. The orientation and integration of structure within the body expressing itself as a frequency that is measured by this device. And then you see how all of those different frequencies are interacting with each other. In this way, you would be able to view disorder in real time. You would be able to see the very vibration that causes distress and disorder. Alternatively, you could view the opposite situation where a bunch of people had come together and were expressing the same frequency spontaneously in the way that they were designed to express it. And you can imagine what that might look like if it was possible to view it in the same way that you could view body temperatures. It would be a picture very different from one that you might find, say, in a dense urban city where everyone is on their own and influenced by all of the waves and other information that the body is being forced to decode, which disrupts the signal that it is supposed to be receiving from that which created it, the body that is. Very interesting. Perhaps this is the metaphorical lens through which scales higher in perception are able to view us on planet Earth. In that way, they could diagnose a condition here in this place in the same way that one of our scientists would diagnose something looking through a microscope, magnifying the view, seeing it in a different way that is not possible with our ordinary decoding system through the eyes. Pythagoras had the music of the spheres idea as it related to the planets and the vibration that the planets made in their rotation through the sky. Vibration is music, and your organs are vibrating in their own way, not like the planets are, but synergistically operating together in the same way that those planets and the stars are a clock of sorts. That's all astrology is. It's a clock. And people learn how to read that time. And of course, the powers that be know that time already, and they coordinate their agenda around it. And going back to the music of the spheres, this is why the moon is capable of affecting the tides on Earth. It has a pull on water. And our bodies, as a part of the symphony that is going on, are largely comprised of water. So they feel that pull in the same way. And you have people affected by full moons in the same way that the tides are affected by them on a larger scale. I mean, just think about it like that. It's almost too much to comprehend. You are going through all the things that are going on as far as what your senses are decoding in any given moment when you're outside, and you're not even thinking about the fact that a planet above you in this sky, whatever that is also affecting you in a subtle way that you just can't quite perceive. It's incredible. And if you get into ideas about what the heart actually is, it's more a regulation device than a pump, if that makes sense. The body is a perpetual motion machine that is self-sustaining in certain ways. Now, obviously, our biology has been tweaked to require us to have fuel for the perpetual motion machine to continue functioning over a long time period. But you can easily imagine just a few tweaks to the body that would make it able to sustain itself without any sort of external fuel being put inside of it, because all of the building blocks for that design are there already. There's just a few pieces missing. I've gone into a couple of them in prior videos about B12, our lack of the ability to synthesize it on our own. We have to acquire it from our diet, and that is a fundamental building block of the body. It must have it. A simple tweak to the design of the human body, making it so that we actually were able to produce and process our own version of that internally, like we do so many other building blocks that the body needs. Just a small little tweak like that, and you can start to envision scenarios where you take that first step outside, like I was discussing earlier, and you're absorbing the light in a way that sustains you, as a plant sustains itself through photosynthesis. And in a way that you would not become weak and malnourished if you did not replenish yourself with fuel. If you view the heart as regulating the body in that way, the rhythm of it, the rhythm of your experience in the world, you can view the blood in a different way too, as something that is alive on its own, because the heart is only a regulator in that scenario, and the blood has its own energy because it is vortexual in its flow, in the same way that a river has laminar flow through its vortex. This is what Victor Schauberger dedicated his life to researching. And you can kind of see evidence of this in various places in this insane world, right? You have the Torah, which forbids the consumption of blood. Why? Because they believed that it contained the animal's life force. And that's where the kosher rules on slaughtering animals comes from. Well, it's not much of a stretch to say, well, if that's what's going on with the animals, surely it's very similar with us and our blood. And then you can see why a 75-year-old man would be sitting down in a chair next to an 18-year-old man, and they have an IV hooked up to them that is draining blood from the 18-year-old and putting it into their body, because that young blood is giving them some sort of vitality. It's replenishing energy into their body, making them feel better for a short amount of time. Now, you can see how something like that would get out of control, most likely, in the same way that any drug is almost always abused in the long run. And maybe that's where we get into some of the sicker rituals that are taking place on this planet. And that can be as innocent as a self-proclaimed witch thinking they're doing magic with blood, creating their own spell. And that even filters then into certain movements on the internet, like that insane blood over intent ritual thing that was going on YouTube a few years ago. I mean, maybe it is still going on, I have no idea, but that was a thing for a while where people were actually casting their own spells with their own blood. And the reason that it became like that is because of the fundamental truth that I'm getting into here about what the blood really is and where those beliefs are coming from, right? That's all filtering into the mainstream from lesser known occult circles that are already doing these things and have been doing these things for who knows how long at this point, centuries. Anyway, I'm digressing a little bit here. All of that sensory information is being decoded by your body at the same time that all of those involuntary functions are going on in your body. Just an incredible, awe-inspiring amount of things being done all at once by this thing we call a body. And then, all of a sudden, on top of that, something emerges that your body perceives through that process as dangerous. And you have what is referred to as the fight or flight response. Meaning, your heart, as the regulator of your blood flow, all of a sudden starts expanding and contracting in a much more rapid rhythm than it was prior to any of that occurring. Prior to seeing what you saw, the regulation of the rhythm of the body is nice and calm and relaxed. And then you see something that your body perceives as dangerous, and it goes from ba-dum, ba-dum to ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. And your hairs all over your body stand on end. Time dilates, it slows down, and you zero in on the threat. Your adrenaline floods into your bloodstream, and you have a heightened level of awareness that can produce similarly heightened levels of strength and speed. Obviously, this is something we developed from being in the wild, in nature, dealing with potential threats. And you have a couple choices in that moment, right? You can fight whatever it is. You're making that determination in real time if it's something that can be done. Or you can engage in flight. You run away to safety somewhere. Maybe your shelter is near, or maybe you can outsmart whatever it is by climbing to a place that it can't reach, depending on whether or not you recognize what the predator is, what the danger is. Either way, it's going to be over momentarily. Either you engage in the fight and you win or lose, and then it's over either way, or you engage in the flight and you survive, and then it's over. And your body comes back into resonance with how it is supposed to be as a baseline. Now, I'm using the wild and nature as an example, but it's the same thing as if you experienced it in your shelter. For example, let's say that I just sense something is off and I'm in bed. I get out of bed and I'm walking out of wherever I'm sleeping and I hear something that is off. And I don't know what it is, but it's off. And so I flick on a light switch. Obviously, we're in modern times now. We have electricity. And I have no idea how it happened, but I see a rattlesnake about 10 feet from me as I turn on the light. And you have the exact same fight or flight response. A huge part of which is fear, right? I mean, it's a completely natural form of fear because that fear is what is driving the adrenaline that will help you survive the situation. So we want to take note of that before going further, especially as it relates to things that we've heard other people say for a while now about how you want to have no fear, or fear is an illusion. Well, saying fear is an illusion is kind of like saying reality is an illusion. It doesn't make it any less real. No matter what the ultimate truth of it is on some existential level, when you're in the moment dealing with reality, the fear is very real and not an illusion. And actually, you need it because it's helping you survive. But you can get into dangerous territory where people are trying to tell you that you're some kind of failure if you experience fear, right? That you should never have fear. Be a warrior that has no fear. And that could be beneficial in certain circumstances where you maybe were in more ancient times and about to engage in some huge hand-to-hand battle or something like that. Well, not being attached to your life and the outcome of living or dying would probably be useful in a scenario like that. And the best warriors would probably have that mindset. Sort of like the Vikings did, or at least how they depict the Vikings. Who knows how accurate that really was. But, I mean, it probably was somewhat close to the truth because their religious belief was that if they died in battle, they're going to their version of heaven, Valhalla. So that's a pretty good motivator as far as not caring whether you live or die in a battle. We could say some other things about that being very useful to the powers that be, as all of these ideas tend to be. That's just the nature of this place. Without even getting into the insanity of war and actually killing another human being for no other reason than what you are told by someone else. The point is, Fear is not something to pretend like it doesn't exist, because it's very real. And if that rattlesnake is 10 feet away from you, shaking its tail, making that noise that gives it its name, you are going to have fear flood through your body because you know that thing could kill you. If it bit you and you were alone, there's nothing you could do. The poison would probably overcome you. Now, there are certain things you could try to do before it incapacitated you. But still, in that moment, you're going to be very afraid. Because guess what? You don't see a rattlesnake 10 feet in front of you in your house or wherever you live very often, right? It's going to be a very terrifying feeling at first. And you have that fight or flight. Okay, I could run back into my room and close the door and try to get help some way if I have some way to contact somebody. And you're making all of those calculations in split seconds. Like I said, time dilates. It moves slower. And you're calculating all of this on the fly. Or you could say, I'm going to fight the rattlesnake. I'm going to go over there and try to kill it. Maybe you have a bat or something like that. Or if you're on a completely different plane of existence, maybe you have a completely neutral view of the situation and that you have that initial burst of fear, but then that comes back to, okay, hold on a second. I know that this animal can sense my fear and that is going to make it afraid. So if I calm down, center myself in this moment, perhaps I can lead the snake out of my place. And then you have all kinds of other concerns like, well, can I really just like lead it out where it might get my neighbors? Like there's a whole calculus that goes into this kind of thing. I'm more talking about the fight or flight response, so I'm just going to focus on that, or else I'll just end up on a million tangents. Not literally a million tangents, of course. I'm now correcting my hypothetical tangents, so I know I'm not talking about what I wanted to talk about. Anyway, fight or flight and the rattlesnake. It's kind of an arbitrary example, but sort of along the lines of the centering yourself angle, though, would be if you came out in that scenario and you just so happen to work on a snake farm. Maybe that's your job. For whatever reason, you handle snakes for a living. And you step out of your room and you see that rattlesnake sitting there staring at you, looking like it's about to pounce. And you're not even worried about it in that moment. It's another day at the office for you. Oh, a rattlesnake's out. I see this all the time. I know what to do. And this is where the phrase knowledge is power comes from. So much of fear is a product of the unknown. We fear what we don't have familiarity with. So if you encounter a situation that would ordinarily produce fight or flight, but it's something that you are intimately familiar with, well, you don't have the same reaction that everyone else does because you don't have that fear of the unknown. You've handled situations like this before. And in that case, you remember you have your snake pole in your room and you just grab it real quick and then you grab the snake and you put it in a bag or whatever they do. I don't know. you take care of it somehow and then, you take it to some snake sanctuary. Or, well, I guess in that scenario, you take it to your work, right? You work with snakes. I forgot. So the great equalizer with the fight or flight adrenaline rush, the terror, the fear, is familiarity, is knowing what to do. And I always remember I had a great example of this given to me by my sister, who has medical training. And her daughter, when she was really young, was eating something and she started choking. And as soon as my sister realized what was happening, she had this full-on panic, fight or flight moment. Even though it wasn't her survival, it was her daughter's survival at stake. And of course, might as well be your own survival at stake. And she said she was just in a state of pure panic. And was going through all the calculations. What do I do? Do I call 911? Oh, by the time I call 911, she might be dead. Do I give her the Heimlich? She's a baby. I can't give a baby a Heimlich maneuver. Well, I could kill her. Like, what do I do? And then she said she just all of a sudden said to herself, wait a second. You have trained for this. You know this scenario. You know what to do. And in that moment, because she had the familiarity, because she had the knowledge, she just went through what she had been taught how to do, and she quickly did whatever you do to a baby. I don't know. She said she like put her finger in her mouth and scooped it out. And like put her body in a certain position. I don't know. They have all these things that you do in these scenarios. I'm not a doctor. I don't know how you do this stuff. But that's the way she described it to me. And it was over like that. She said in the aftermath, she had all this adrenaline pumping, and she was really proud of herself for remembering to stay calm because that was the most important part. And yeah, she retold something that every doctor can relate to. Imagine the terror of a doctor who is performing surgery on someone the first time that they nick an artery or they make some other kind of mistake that they know will kill the patient if they don't fix it immediately. Now, obviously, in some scenarios, they do kill the patient. I mean, that's just what happens when humans are operating on other humans. But the great doctors, the one that everyone requests and wants to work on them, are the ones who have proven time and again that they have what it takes when that sort of pressure is put on them. They know how to deal with the fear in that moment. And they remember what they have been taught, and they know that they've been through it before. They know how to deal with that pressure, and they fix the mistake that they made, and, the person survives. And it's an otherwise successful surgery. Now, why am I talking about all of this? Well, I was thinking about what's going on in the world now is very similar to the scenarios that I've gone into here about the fight or flight response. Due to our history as beings in this place and the way that it has been passed down genetically in our genetic memory, through the morphogenetic fields and just literally in our DNA passed down, we have the adapted evolutionary ability to respond accordingly, like our ancestors did in these types of situations. The difference, of course, is that in civilization, in society as we know it, most of these types of encounters have been removed from our daily experience. And indeed, we are more, because of the way that our cerebral cortex was manipulated, we are the predators on this planet, at least in the refresh rate that we perceive as reality. We are the apex predator, right? You got to make that caveat to the description. But especially since that predation has become so mechanized in so many ways, we just don't experience the same situations and scenarios that we did when we were in nature or the wild. However, that fight or flight mechanism is still very much there in our bodies, and it is exploited by that which has been constructed around us through the mind primarily in the way that media triggers it. The media puts us into a fight or flight response with the information that it presents to us. If you're in the mainstream thought form, that's done with the war and the politics and the race hating and all the other ways that they get people into that fight or flight mode. They present something as a danger to your survival based on your personal belief, whatever it is, based on your team that you're supporting. The survival of your team is at stake, is a good way to put it. So you can either run from whatever is being presented to you, or you can fight it. You can argue with it, give your energy to it. But it's simultaneously happening in what is referred to as the conspiracy theorist circles, or the alternative media as it used to be known, when it started after 9/11. I mean, well, speaking of 9/11, is there a better example of fight or flight than that? Of putting the world in that state, filled with adrenaline due to a perceived threat against them. And then what is the response? Well, of course, they whipped everyone up into the fight response. We're going to war with them. That's the answer. And then everybody gives that sigh of relief. But of course, they keep the pressure on in that way in what was known as the War on Terror. And you're constantly in that state of anxiety or fear, however you want to perceive it. You're in that state when you walk into a place. Oh my gosh, is someone going to attack this place? In the first few months after September 11th, 2001. And that's very taxing on your body, right? We went into how many things are being decoded by your senses and everything that's going on internally, and your body's dealing with the food that it's processing at the same time that it's dealing with all of this other stuff. And like I said, it's amazing that the body even still exists, given all of the toxins and poisons that the modern human is exposed to in the 2020s. I guess we'll call ourselves modern because we're alive right now. But, in 20 years, we won't be modern anymore. Everybody is the modern person when they're discussing it in real time. It's kind of a silly thing we do. So that's always going on in the mainstream. And they've shifted it, as I've gone into in prior videos, from the war on terror, foreign terrorists, to domestic terrorism. But it's still the same threat, perceptually anyway. Maybe the 21st century will be known as the age of anxiety. I mean, given all of the perceived threats that come through the media, is it any wonder why the prescription of anti-anxiety drugs is at all-time highs? Why so many people are taking these pharmaceutical concoctions that supposedly lessen the amount of anxiety that people experience? Surely, at least a part of that perpetual anxiety is the result of being stuck in a flight or fight response that never ends. And we all saw a further example of this with the COVID-19 pandemic. That really triggered the fight or flight response. And as a result, the fear, the terror, the anxiety that everyone was experiencing from being flooded with that type of information 24/7 for 2 years, I mean, it really started to wear on people. Physiologically, the fight or flight response is supposed to be temporary. When you are faced with something that evokes it in the world around you, it is only there to get you to survive that temporary situation. It's not designed to be constantly triggered, to be constantly flooding your body with all of the changes that it produces. But when somebody is plugged into the media 24/7, taking all of that information in for over 2 years straight with no resolution in sight, well, of course, it's going to negatively impact the body. It's going to wear people out. That's one of the biggest things that I'm seeing all around me right now is people are generally just tired from what they had to go through the past 2-3 years. Just a state of exhaustion because they were held in limbo, kept in that state where the threat never went away. And so they were constantly in that state of fight or flight. What do I do? How do I combat this invisible threat? How do I overcome it in that way if that's what I choose to do? Or alternatively, how do I run away from it? I guess I just need to hide out from the public if that's the decision I make. And then that has its own issues as far as isolation goes and the effects that that has on the body. And then maybe you spend part of the time in isolation looking into what's really going on, and you come across some con artist on the internet who's telling you that everyone who was vaccinated is going to die in the next 5 years. And it's like, what does that do to the fight or flight response? Where is the potential resolution in that? And imagine the anxiety that that would put you in if you had taken that shot. I mean, that would put your anxiety levels into the stratosphere, relatively speaking. The needle is all the way in the red. You are freaking out when you read something like that. And then you have your own fight or flight response to that information. It's like Russian dolls, a fight or flight response inside a fight or flight response. And you're sitting there thinking, well, if I believe this, I'm going to go crazy. So I just have to pretend like I never heard this. And that's why a lot of people, when they're first exposed to information like this, just immediately tune it out because it's too much for them to handle and there will be no resolution. Intuitively, they know this and they're not ready for it. Their body, their mind, everything that makes them up knows they're not ready for it, and they just kind of shut it down. And in that way, by design, the conspiracy information, as it is relayed to the majority of people by those who they control, puts you in a perpetual fight or flight state that is unresolvable. The conspiracy information is possibly even worse than the mainstream information and the way that it's provokes the fight or flight response. And you can actually see that in the responses of people who are exposed to the conspiracy theory information over a long period of time. What do they do? What are the two choices? Well, they either decide, I'm going to become a warrior of sorts, I'm going to fight them, I'm going to try to defeat their plans for the one world government in the future, and everything that goes along with that, the smart cities, the 15-minute sections of the cities, the digital social credit scores and CBDCs and smart cities in that way. I'm going to fight against it. Or I'm going to run from it. And then you have the whole other trend, which I kind of got involved in a little bit myself a few years ago, where it's like, well, I'm going back to the land. I'm going back to nature, back to the wild. I'm going to start my own homestead, start my own farm. And then the extreme of that is I'm going to be a prepper, right? I'm going to be fully self-sufficient and not need any sort of help from anyone because I know that I won't be a part of that system and they will lock me out, right? So it's fight or flight. They have programmed us to take one of those two avenues. And really, they don't have to do much more than just provide a constant stream of information that reinforces one of those decisions or forces us to make a decision because of all the anxiety and terror and fear of the unknown that it produces, right? We have an unknown idea about the future in this way. It's a blank canvas, but we see their plan for it. We see what picture they're painting. And because we're so disjointed, we don't have a collective vision of what our future would be. And so we talk about their vision of the future. We bring it into existence in that way, or at least we help it come into existence in that way. And that's where all of their agents come into play because they're constantly pumping that information out there about what is coming. And it overwhelms us. You can see the flight response in so many people that comment about this stuff on the internet because it's sort of a sanctioned opinion that is reinforced by those who are there to reinforce opinions like this in the way that they do that, where people say, oh, no one around me gets it. I'm all alone. I don't know what to do. I feel so stuck. I'm so afraid of the future. They don't often say that part, but it's anxiety about an unknown future that is really getting them. I'm so uncertain about what is to come. It seems like such a nightmare. I don't know what to do. And then you kind of spiral from there into your own mind, into your own anxiety, into that fight or flight constant state of adrenaline rush, where your body and your mind want you to make a decision to remove yourself from the perceived threat. But you can't, because you're just stuck consuming the propaganda day after day after day after day. And indeed, there is no solution to that. So you can see the insanity of watching a YouTube channel that is promoting the same material over and over and over again to you over many different years. And alternatively, you can see the insanity of a YouTube channel that takes the exact opposite approach, calls the first approach out and says, oh, you guys can't be doing that. You need to be a warrior. You need to have no fear. No anxiety. I want you to be a fierce warrior of the light. I'm trying to turn you into a winner that isn't afraid, and that's just as detrimental as the other thing, because that has you constantly in the same adrenaline rush where your body is looking for the fight to be over, but it never ends. This has been going on for thousands of years. And in this context, I actually have empathy for people who are swayed by a lot of the things that are put out there as potential solutions to all of this, because your body, especially when you're new to all of this, relatively new, right? You've been looking into it for a few years. You are desperate for some kind of resolution because you need a break. Your body can't handle the adrenaline, anxiety combo depleting your vitality. And someone comes to you and says, don't worry about it. You're here for a reason. Love and light. Just be the change you want to see to the world. Think positively and everything's going to be fine. And then your body goes, oh, finally. We can relax. Everything's going to be okay. Because that's really all anybody wants to hear when they learn about what's really going on in the world. Well, okay, just tell me everything's going to be okay. And in that way, you can have the same empathy for somebody who gets into the religious side of it and they hear a similar story about, well, there's going to come a time where the Messiah is going to return and it is going to rescue us, take us out of here. We won't have to deal with it anymore. And it's the same sigh of relief, like, okay, well, that's great. I don't have to have the anxiety I had about it anymore. I can just watch everything unfold and I'll be taken care of in the end if I maintain my faith in that way. Obviously, the Eastern religions are very similar, but it's just on a different scale, right? Don't be attached to the physical world. Don't lust after materiality. See it for what it is, Maya, an illusion. Enjoy the ride that is the path to samsara or nirvana. Even if it's lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, you'll get there eventually. And it's the same, okay, I can handle that. That'll get me out of this fight or flight response that I'm currently experiencing, this existential crisis. I don't know my place in the world. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know what happens to me when I die, but I can get behind. I can relax now, right? And that's what I meant earlier when I was getting into the rattlesnake metaphor and the idea of the unknown part of it, not knowing how to deal with the situation, it being a new situation, something that you don't have experience in that adds to the anxiety. And we all experience that as it relates to death. I mean, I shouldn't speak for everyone, but I assume most people don't have any memory of this happening before, and there is an anxiety inherent to the idea of not existing someday. Because we are not told who we are, we're not told why we're here in any sort of straightforward way by anyone with any sort of platform that is quote-unquote credible. We're surrounded by lies, so we have to piece it together on our own. And in the process of piecing that together, we get further and further into this vortex of anxiety and fear and terror in the context of fight or flight, and there are no solutions presented, some of the more well-known figures will get on their platforms and say, "We're winning, guys, we're winning." And they'll even tell you that mass arrests are coming. And it's the same sigh of relief. Okay, we're good. It's the hardest thing in the world to not choose a fight or flight option, to choose something that's in the middle of that, to walk some narrow path where you are centered at all times. The way I view it is kind of like trolls on the internet. It's like the Joker said in one of the Nolan Batman movies, where the quote is something along the lines of, "Some people just want to watch the world burn." I think Michael Caine's character says that. There is no rhyme or reason to what is going on when it comes to trolls on the internet sometimes. They just want to watch the world burn, for lack of a better term. It's, can I get some kind of reaction that will make me laugh, right? That I'll just revel in causing the chaos. Which, of course, is where the phrase, "don't feed the trolls," come from. And that's easier said than done, especially when you put yourself out there and expose yourself to potential trolls. Some of these guys are really good, and gals. It's not just guys, but I meant all of you when I said guys. Some people are very good at trolling, and they can get under your skin and provoke you. And some people are only looking for a response. And so it is said, don't feed the trolls. Number one rule on the internet. If they don't get the reaction that they're looking for, it's kind of this big letdown, like Price is Right soundbite, you know, and then they move on to someone else that they can potentially provoke for the lulz, right? And some people would probably think that I'm referring to Stoicism, and it's like, no, there's not really any belief system in this world that I'm referring to. What I'm talking about is something that comes from a non-human source. Humanity is insane, so looking to humans for your answers is problematic, to say the least. All I can say is that whenever I feel the most connected to what we might refer to as God or the Creator, that which is animating all of those processes within my incredible body, whenever that has blessed me with any kind of understanding in any given moment spontaneously, you tend to think that those moments will be encapsulated by some kind of explosion of energy. And I suppose you could somewhat view it like that, but the one word that comes to mind in all of those experiences is calm. Spontaneous moment-to-moment awe, yes, of course, but within that, awe is a calm. And this is why when you are out in nature, wherever it is, on a beach, with your feet in the sand, in a forest, hugging a tree, with your feet on the ground, barefoot, of course, after a while, the overwhelming resonance that your body begins to rhythmically flow with is calm. It's centered, calm, relaxed energy. And in that way, there is no anxiety about the future. Now, of course, if you are in that environment, in this world, you could be flipped from that state of being to the fight or flight state of being in an instant if you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. But overall, when you're in that environment, or any environment like that, the overwhelming feeling is just, it's that sigh of relief that everyone is looking for from the anxiety. And we have all of these man-made choices to choose from to get that sigh of relief, to get that replica of the true calm that comes over you when you know that God has your back. If I wanted to, I could turn my YouTube channel into a constant stream of videos pointing out how everyone else is promoting disinformation of some kind. In some way, shape, or form, that's what they're doing, whether it's intentional or otherwise. Most of the time, let's be real, it's intentional. But I could do that if I wanted to. I could dedicate my channel to that. There's an endless amount of material. But what would I be doing to you if I forced you to assimilate that stream of information? Well, I would be putting you in the fight or flight anxious state. You might not even know it, right? Because you would think I'm exposing. And you would like that. You would think, yeah, this is great. Expose these con artists. Somebody has to do it. And then 3-4 months from now, all of a sudden you're fighting with everyone you know in your life. You can't seem to get along with anybody anymore. I wonder why that is. Oh, because that YouTube channel I was listening to was just bombarding me with this negative energy that was getting me in the fight portion of fight or flight. And so eventually, without even knowing it, I started to apply that attitude and that energy to every part of my life in subtle ways, which affected every aspect of my life. And it's the same thing in the opposite direction for somebody who is doing a constant stream of videos trying to get you in the flight state of mind, which obviously is a function of anxiety, fear of the unknown. The future is looking so uncertain. What do I do? How do I prepare? I have to do all of these things to get ready. Oh my gosh, there's not enough time. I'm freaking out. And before you know it, in the same way, you're alienated from everybody you've ever known because they can't understand what you're going through because they're not pumping the same stream of information through their mind that you are. And they are not in the fight or flight mode to the extreme that you are because they're consuming the mainstream propaganda, which is a less extreme form of it. And that just makes sense, right? Because they don't want all of their slaves to walk off the plantation at once. It has to be less extreme. So they're agitated and their energy is siphoned in a way that protects the system, but at the same time keeps them functioning in the roles that they need to function, at least until automation fully takes over most of what we do. If their vision of the future comes to pass. So anyways, what is the point of all of this? Well, I don't know if I really have a point other than to make the observation that it seems like the human mind is in a perpetual panic attack. It's in a perpetual state of anxiety because the flight or fight response is constantly triggered in all of the ways that we are exposed to information, as I went into in the beginning regarding the sensory decoding system and all the ways that information is processed by that decoding system. In addition to everything that's going on inside of the body, you have this constant loop of information coming in and out of the body in relationship to the external world. And as a result of that relationship to the external world, here in this place, we have the addition of media plugged into everyone's mind. And that media is designed to keep people in a constant state of anxiety. If it bleeds, it leads. And it's even worse with the information that's masquerading as the quote-unquote truth, because while a lot of the details are correct, those details plunge you even deeper into the panic attack, even deeper into the anxiety attack. And we've all experienced that at one point or another, getting into this information. Some of it is so dark and so terrifying in its darkness that it's impossible not to be affected by it in that way, to have some sort of anxious response to it, to have that fight or flight response. okay, I need to fight this somehow, and then they got you, or I need to get away from this somehow, and maybe that extends your existence here in this world for a little while, but it doesn't help the problem in any way. In the same way that fighting it won't help the problem in any way because it's so far beyond your ability to get physical with it, in the sense of you doing anything on your own. So be very mindful of what you are consuming. Be mindful of what you're letting into your being. And it's sort of like your diet with food. Some people will do an elimination diet to try to figure out if some thing that they're putting into their body is causing an allergic reaction. And so you introduce one food for a little bit, see if it is doing anything to you in a negative way, causing some sort of reaction. And if you don't get that reaction, okay, it's safe to eat this. And then you move on to the next thing. And you slowly reintroduce all the foods in that way until you find the thing that is giving you the allergic reaction or giving you the autoimmune condition that you're suffering from. Metaphorically, you can do the same thing with the ideas that are going into your mind. And principally, as it relates to media, this is the light waves and the moving pictures through the eyes and the sound waves through the ears. Be mindful of what you're putting into your being and possibly do an elimination diet. Fast from it all for a certain period of time. Don't watch any of it. And then just reintroduce one of the sources of information that you used to go to and see how it makes you feel. And really pay attention to how it makes you feel in the context of keeping everything else the same. And then from there, go through all of the things that you let into your being in that way. And you can find the things that are particularly contributing to any sort of fight or flight response that the information is keeping you paralyzed within. And that's especially true for the people who don't have enough resources to engage in flight and have their own land somewhere, who likewise have no ability to physically fight in any way other than silent revolutions like I'm only going to pay cash for things and I'm not going to use any kind of digital technology to pay for anything, which is probably more effective at this point than any sort of physical thing you could do to this system. But people in that kind of situation just feel stuck. I can't escape. There's nothing I can do to overpower it. And you just spiral into that anxious place where you're just waiting on a terrible future to manifest itself to you. Can't you just unveil it and get it over with at this point? Why are you keeping me in suspense? You see that sentiment a lot on the internet. Just get it over with already. Unfortunately, this is tangentially related to the existential crisis of our eventual death, of the idea that we will cease to exist at some point. And you just have to come to terms with that on your own. That's different for everyone. Going back to what I was talking about as it related to knowledge being power, and the doctor who is operating on someone makes a mistake that is life or death, terror-inducing, but they've been through it before. They have the training. They know what to do. And they stay calm and centered in the face of massive pressure and potential horrific outcomes in their life, personally speaking. They stay calm and they get the job done. They don't panic. Metaphorically, we're dealing with a similar situation in this reality. What we are exposed to, the level of control that exists here, its ability to see and interact and dominate. It's overwhelming. And if you look at it all at once and try to figure out how you're going to overcome it, you're going to crumble under the weight of the anxiety of the whole thing. So for each of us, there are lessons that we've had in the past that have taught us how to deal with a similar situation where we were under immense pressure, but we dealt with it, where we faced a crisis of some sort, but we found our way through it. And that is where you draw the lessons for how to deal with the bigger situation that you find yourself in now. And for me, I've been searching for that sweet spot where I'm in great appreciation for the gift of awareness, of just being alive, and occasionally being blessed with the ability to catch a glimpse of this spontaneous awe of life itself, of creation itself, the beauty of it. But at the same time, not lusting after keeping that ability to perceive at all costs, including my very soul itself. I will not lust after the experience in that way to where I would give up everything just to keep it. When it's my time, and I have to come to terms with that I have no control over that in any way. And if I'm being honest with myself, there is absolutely fear involved in that realization. Because it's fear of the unknown. Again, it's going back to those situations where part of why you're so terrified in a given fight or flight situation is that you have no experience with it prior. You don't have the power of knowledge, and this makes you feel great anxiety. And because none of us have been told why we're here, who we are, what we're supposed to do, what the meaning of existence is here, we have that anxiety of the unknown. And that just either consciously or in a lot of people subconsciously adds on to all the other anxiety that people are experiencing living in this world. And hence we have the collective state of the human race currently as I speak in the year 2023. Anyways, that's enough for now. Later.